The following moments may contain explicit language. The National Emergency Response Agency, broadcasting live from the Emergency Operations Center. Today is day 5 of the declared Level 5 biological incident. This is your 900 hours daily update. Please remain calm, stay indoors, and continue to follow the safety protocols issued by your local authorities. We understand that many of you have questions and growing concerns. While the situation remains fluid, the agency is committed to providing timely and transparent updates. Together we can navigate these unprecedented circumstances. At this time, we urge all citizens to limit non-essential movement and avoid the designated red zones. The following update includes critical information on affected regions, known symptoms, and survival recommendations. Zone status updates. Zone status updates. As of this morning, containment efforts continue in Zone through FA. Zone A, previously reported as secure, has experienced minor breaches in its perimeter. We strongly advise residents in adjacent areas to remain vigilant and follow established curfew guidelines. Zone C, encompassing the northern suburbs, as a red zone. Reports from this region describe significant increases in infected individuals. Survivors attempting to flee the area have noted erratic behavior among the infected, including prolonged stares at familiar buildings or objects and repetitive movements that suggest faint recollections of prior activities. Zone E, primarily a rural area with limited civilian access. Relief teams are working around the clock to maintain food and medical supplies. However, we caution against venturing into open fields or wooded areas, as reports indicate clusters of infected migrating through these regions. The following areas remain safe zones with reinforced checkpoints: Zone G, Zone H, and Zone J. We remind all citizens to cooperate with checkpoint personnel to ensure the safety of our communities. Secure zones are critical hubs for distribution and communication efforts. Behavior and symptoms. Infected behavior and symptoms. The Behavioral Analysis Division has continued its studies on the infected population. Preliminary findings indicate that the infected residual neural activity to sporadic behaviors reminiscent of past memories. For example, observed near musical instruments, have attempted repetitive motions as though trying to play. Similarly, some infected have been seen gathering near schools or places of employment, though these behaviors appear erratic and purposeless. Please understand these actions are not signs of consciousness or recovery. Neurological decay and should not be interpreted as a reason for hope or interaction. The infection manifests through the following stages: initial symptoms, fever, disorientation, and an insatiable hunger-ness. Intermediate pace, loss of higher cognitive functions, and the onset of aggressive, predatory behavior. Full infection becomes non-responsive to pain and operates solely on instinct, with heightened strength and reduced mobility in extreme cases. If you or someone you know begins to exhibit these symptoms, it is imperative to immediately by contacting the National Emergency Hotline at 1-800-ZOMMBIES. Guidelines. Public safety guidelines. To maximize public safety, the following measures are in place effective immediately. Curfew. All movement outside secured premises is prohibited from 1800 to 600 hours. Violation will result in detainment for your protection. Provisions. Each household is entitled to weekly rations. Occur on Mondays and Thursdays at designated supply centers. Bring your ID and ration card for collection. Evacuation orders. If your region is marked for evacuation, follow the instructions of personnel at all times. Avoid carry unnecessary items, as this will delay evacuation efforts. Communication blackout. Areas may experience temporary loss of internet and telecommunication services. We assure you this is a containment measure and not a sign of governmental collapse. Additionally, we ask that you remain indoors and refrain from approaching infected individuals, regardless of perceived familiarity or harmless behavior. The infected are highly unpredictable and pose an immediate threat to anyone in proximity. Broadcast updates 3 times daily to ensure you remain informed. Your cooperation is vital to our efforts to restore order. Remember, humanity has faced crisis before, and resilience has always prevailed. Stay strong, stay united, and most importantly, stay safe. This is the National Emergency Response Agency signing off until 100 hours. Thank you for your attention, and may we all find strength in the days ahead. This is the National Emergency Response Agency. As part of today's briefing, we bring you verified accounts from survivors in affected areas. These first-hand reports serve not only to inform, but also to remind us of a vigilance and solidarity. The following accounts were recorded over the past 24 hours. Sensitive content may be distressing for some listeners. Survivors from Zone C continue to arrive at checkpoint shelters. If you were separated from loved ones, report their last known location to the Missing Persons Bureau. We will continue our reunification efforts. Now, another report from Zone F, detailing interactions with the infected are consistent with what we know about infected behavior patterns. While residual neural activity may cause infected individuals to perform actions resembling memories or habits, these actions are not signs of recovery. Approach all infected individuals with extreme caution. Familiarity with their past lives does not make them less dangerous. They are not your loved ones anymore. These survivor accounts underline the importance of following all directives and maintaining personal safety. Emotions run high in times like these, but it is critical to act rationally and not allow sentimentality to cloud judgment. We extend our gratitude to those who have shared their experiences and remind everyone that these stories are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. National Emergency Response Agency. In this section of the update, we will provide an overview of the coordinated military response to the outbreak and the ongoing containment efforts. Our armed forces are up under extreme conditions to ensure public safety and limit the spread of the infection. Please remember, all information shared is intended for public reassurance and awareness. Specific details that could compromise operational security will be omitted. Containment zones and deployment updates. As of 600 hours this morning, containment zones have been established in 15 metropolitan areas across the country. These zones are reinforced with physical barriers, surveyors, and round-the-clock military patrols. Major efforts are concentrated in Zone A, with the highest reported infection rates. Zone C acting as a secondary containment line to slow infection spread into rural communities. Zone F, critical for securing food supply chains and ensuring resource stability. Each zone has been equipped with quarantine facilities, tactical response units, and supply depots for personnel and civilians. With infected populations, engagement protocols are designed to minimize risk to both military personnel and civilians. Rules of engagement prioritize containment over eradication, but all infected individual mediate threats are neutralized. Our soldiers are trained to recognize the behaviors associated with residual memory. For instance, zones indicate that some infected may gather in familiar locations such as schools, shopping centers, or even their former residences. It is crucial to understand these behaviors are remnants of neural activity, not signs of cognition or recovery. The infected remain extremely dangerous, regardless of perceived passivity. Humanitarian operations. Our forces are also actively engaged in humanitarian operations. These include evacuation missions, coordinating with local authorities to safely relocate civilians from high-risk areas, reshops, delivering essential supplies such as food, water, and medical aid to survivors in isolated regions, reunification efforts, facilitating the location and transport of separated family members to designated safe zones. We urge all civilians to cooperate fully with evacuation orders and to report their needs to the nearest military outpost or emergency hotline. An encounter report, Operation Iron Veil. To illustrate the challenges faced by our troops, here is a declassified account from Operation Iron Veil, conducted in Zone B last night. A tactical squad was dispatched to secure a power substation critical to the region's energy grid. Upon arrival, of infected gathered near the facility's main entrance. One soldier noted unusual behavior. The infected seemed fixated on a vending machine inside the lobby. Several appeared to mimic the motion of press buttons or peering into the glass. This brief distraction allowed the squad to secure the perimeter without immediate confrontation. However, it also raised questions about how much these residual behaviors influence infected movements and group dynamics. These incidents are under continuous study to refine our engagement strategies and containment tactics. public cooperation and support. While our military works tirelessly on the front lines, we rely on the cooperation of every citizen to maintain control. Here's how you can help. Follow all directives. Evacuate when ordered with curfews and avoid restricted zones. Report sightings. Communication channels to inform authorities of infected sightings or unusual behaviors. Stay informed. Access official broadcasts and updates regularly for accurate information. Our forces remain committed to their containment, protection, and eventual recovery. We honor their bravery and sacrifice in these unprecedented times. National Emergency Response Agency. In this segment, we will discuss the latest scientific findings regarding the nature of the infection, its transmission patterns, and ongoing efforts to develop a countermeasure. This information is shared to promote awareness and transparency while urging all citizens to remain vigilant. Scientific teams have classified the infection as a neuroviral pathogen with unique properties, designated HZNV13 as host zombie neurological virus 13. This virus is unlike any we have previously encountered. Key characteristics include rapid transmission. Spread occurs primarily through bites or exposure to infected bodily fluids. Transmission through aerosols remains unconfirmed but is under investigation. Neural hijacking. The virus primarily targets the brain, reactivating neural circuits to induce motor functions despite the host's biological death. Residual memories. Infected individuals display behaviors suggesting faint neural echoes, such as revisiting familiar locations or mimicking prior habits. Research is ongoing to determine how these neural echoes might influence movement patterns and group clustering among the infected. Warning signs and symptoms. It is critical to identify potential cases as early as possible. The initial symptoms of HZNV13 infection include high fever and chills, typically within the first 6 hours of fatigue, sudden onset of muscle weakness and lethargy, neurological changes, erratic eye movement disorientation, and hyperaggression within 24 hours. If you or anyone you know experiences these symptoms after potential exposure, seek medical isolation immediately. Early containment is vital to preventing widespread transmission. Ongoing research efforts. Our brightest minds are collaborating across laboratories worldwide to develop a vaccine or treatment for HZNV13. Current research areas include pathogen genome mapping. Scientists are seeing the virus's genetic structure to identify potential vulnerabilities. Antiviral compounds that could inhibit viral replication in controlled environments. Immune response studies, analyzing survivors who were exposed but did not convert to identify potential immunity factors. While progress is being made, a viable countermeasure remains months, if not years away. Until then, containment and prevention are our strongest tools. Field observation. Anomaly cases. A recent field study has documented a peculiar anomaly among infected individuals in Zone D. A group of infected was observed exhibiting synchronized behavior, all standing motionless in a semi-circle around a burned-out vehicle. Researchers theorize that specific environmental triggers, such as objects linked to strong emotional memories, might elicit such group behaviors. Understanding these patterns could allow us to predict and manipulate infected movements for safer containment. Science Initiative, we are calling upon the public to assist in our research efforts by reporting unusual infected behaviors or patterns in your area. Observations should be sent to the Citizen Science Hotline, where data will be analyzed by trained experts. Please include as much detail as possible, such as time and location of observation, description of the infected's actions, any environmental factors that might have influenced behavior, information and myths. Lastly, we must address the spread of misinformation regarding the infection. Myth: infected individuals can be cured through traditional medicine. Unfortunately, this is false. There is no treatment currently available. Myth: the infected retain full consciousness and communicate. This is also false. Any observed behavior is a result of residual neural activity, not awareness or intent. Rely only on verified information shared through official broadcasts such as this one. Spreading false information puts lives at risk and unds our collective efforts. Our science is our greatest hope in combating this unprecedented crisis. We thank the dedicated researchers and medical professionals risking their lives daily to uncover solutions. Together, through perseverance and cooperation, we will prevail. This concludes the scientific research segment. Up next, we will address societal impacts and the mental health toll of the outbreak. Stay tuned. As the outbreak progresses, we recognize the profound impact this crisis is having on our communities, our families, and our collective mental health. In this section, we'll address societal challenges, provide practical advice for coping with the psychological strain of these unprecedented times. Normalcy has been disrupted for millions, and places of worship are closed. Supply chains for essential goods remain under immense strain, and movement restrictions limit contact with loved ones. These changes can be overwhelming, leading to feeling isolation, fear, and despair. Here are some ways to adapt. Establish a routine, even in the confines of your home or shelter. Schedule can provide a sense of stability. Focus on small goals. Accomplishing even minor tasks can boost morale and give you a sense of purpose. Stay informed, not overwhelmed. Limit exposure to distressing news. Choose reliable sources and set specific times to check updates. The psychological toll of an event like this cannot be underestimated. With feelings of hopelessness or anxiety, you are not alone. Recognize the signs of stress and take steps to manage them. Symptoms of stress: trouble sleeping, irritability, difficulty concentrating, and symptoms like headaches or muscle tension. Practice grounding techniques, deep breathing, mindfulness, or focusing on simple. Reduce feelings of panic. Connect with others. Even if physical contact is not possible, stay in touch through available communication methods. For those in need of immediate assistance, our national hotline is 24/7 with mental health professionals trained to provide support during this crisis. Despite the challenges, incredible acts of courage and kindness across the country, communities are coming together to support one another, offering food, supplies, and shelter to those in need. Examples of resilience include neighborhood watch groups helping to maintain safety, volunteer networks distributing food and medical supplies, in windows or shared online. We urge all citizens to contribute to this spirit of solidarity in whatever way they can. Every small act of kindness makes a difference. As resources dwindle and tough become inevitable, we must approach these situations with empathy and fairness. Whether it's rationing food or prioritizing medical care, guide our actions. Remember, value every life. Each individual matters regardless of their situation. Share equitably. Ensure resources are distributed fairly, especially to the most vulnerable among us. Avoid panic behavior. Hoarding and selfishness only worsen the situation for everyone. False information spreads rapidly during crisis. Panic and harmful decisions. Verify rumors before sharing them, and rely only on trusted authorities for updates. Common myths being debunked include: drinking specific solutions can cure the infection. This is false and dangerous. Government facilities are secretly hoarding vaccines. As of now, no vaccine exists. If you encounter misinformation, needed hotline. Together, we can combat fear with truth. Even in the darkest moments, there is hope. History has shown humanity's remarkable capacity to endure and rebuild. This crisis will pass, and we will emerge stronger for having faced it together. Take comfort in the knowledge that you are not alone. The government, scientific community, and your fellow citizens are working tirelessly to restore safety and normalcy. Stay strong, stay safe, and stay united. As we continue to adapt to this rapidly evolving crisis, we must focus on essential survival strategies. This broadcast will provide critical advice on managing resources, staying safe, and protecting your loved ones. These guidelines are designed to maximize your chances of survival and maintain order within your community. And nutritious food is paramount during emergencies. Here's how to secure and manage your supplies. Water. Boil water for at least 1 minute if you suspect contamination. Use purification tablets or filtrate systems when available. Store water in sealed, sanitized containers. Each person needs at least 1 gallon of water per day. Food. Perishable items such as canned goods, dried beans, rice, and pasta. Rotate your stock to prevent spoilage. Keep manual can openers on hand. Portion control. Ration carefully, consuming smaller portions to extend supplies while maintaining energy levels. Avoid scavenging from dangerous areas, and do not consume food from compromised packaging. Shelter is vital. Protect your space and plan for contingencies. Fortify your shelter. Reinforce doors and windows using wooden boards, metal bars, or heavy furniture. Ensure there are no easy entry points for sentinel threats. Safe zones. Identify a safe room within your home, preferably one with minimal windows and sturdy walls. See supplies including first aid kits, flashlights, and communication devices. Escape routes. Plan at least 2 exit strategies in case your shelter becomes compromised. Share these plans with everyone in your household. While we hope for a swift resolution, the situation remains volatile. Consider the following. Basic weaponry. Using household items such as baseball bats, crowbars, or knives. Use firearms only if you are trained and can do so safely. Defensive tactics. Avoid direct confrontation whenever possible. Use barriers and secure hiding spots to evade threats. Alertness. Stay vigilant at all times. Keep watch and shifts, especially during nighttime hours. Being caught unaware. Staying connected can mean the difference between life and death. Use these strategies to maintain communication. Radio. Tune into emergency frequencies for updates. Battery, powered or hand craned, reliable when the power grid is down. Signaling. Use flashlights, whistles with neighbors to communicate silently when needed. Community networks. Establish a local support group to share resources, skills, and information. Cooperation strengthens resilience, maintaining hygiene to prevent illness and infection. Sanitation. Dispose of waste properly. Dig latrines away from living and water areas. Early when cleaning. Personal hygiene. Wash hands regularly with soap and water or use alcohol-based sanitizers. Medical supplies. Stock up on over-the-counter medicines, bandages, and antiseptics. Treat mind immediately to prevent complications. Be mindful of exhaustion and stress as they weaken the immune system. Supplies. Prioritize safety. Scout locations. Observe potential scavenging sites from a distance before approaching. Travel light. Carry only essentials to ensure mobility. Avoid confrontation. If you conjure others, prioritize de-escalation and retreat over conflict. Remember, preparation is not just about survival. It's about resilience. Your ability to stay calm, work together, and adapt will help us endure these trying times. We'll be back with more guidance tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, stay prepared, and look out for one another. Regarding the evolving behavior of the infected and insights into the psychological challenges you may face as survivors. We've been tracking reports from multiple sources and have identified key changes in the behavior of the infected. These updates are critical for your ongoing safety. Initially, the infected exhibited unpredictable, erratic movements, animal instincts. However, we've observed notable changes over the past few weeks. The infected seem to retain traces of their former emotions, though these are fleeting and unreliable. It's important to note the following. Emotional triggers. Some of the infected have been seen responding to specific stimuli, such as the sound of a crying child, or even certain smells. These reactions are inconsistent and often do not last long, but they suggest that the infected may still hold fragments of their past emotional experiences. Mimicking behavior. In rare to individuals have been seen imitating the actions of survivors, such as trying to open doors or manipulate objects. Surprised that this is a result of their deteriorating memory functions, as they attempt to replicate learned behaviors from before the outbreak. Aggression cycles. Though aggression remains a constant, the infected's attacks to come in waves. After periods of intense activity, they often enter a dormant state. Unpredictable and varies from individual to individual. As survivors, the psychological toll of this crisis cannot be overstated. The stress of constant danger, isolation, and loss can severely affect your mental health. Here are key points for mental and emotional well-being. Isolation. Many survivors are isolated in their shelters. Other survivors. This isolation can lead to depression, anxiety, and paranoia. It's critical to maintain regular contact with others, whether through radio communication or other means. Post-traumatic stress. If you've experienced direct encounters with the infected or lost loved ones, you may be suffering from PTSD. Symptoms can include flashbacks and hypervigilance. Try to establish a routine, focus on tasks, and when possible, take breaks to avoid mental exhaustion. Group dynamics. If you're part of a group, tension may arise. Scarcity of resource, differing priorities, and personal grief can lead to conflicts. Establish clear communication and leadership roles, and prioritize collaboration. Holding on to hope is essential, but so is confronting the reality of the situation. False hope can lead to poor decision-making, but complete despair is equally dangerous. Balance is key. Acknowledge the dire circumstances, but never lose sight of your will to survive. Key psychological tips for coping. Maintain routine. Establish daily routines. Small. Whether it's preparing meals, keeping watch, or other tasks, maintaining structure can provide a sense of control. Limit exposure to triggers. If you find certain noises, sights, or actions particularly stressing, limit your exposure to them, whether it's the sight of the infected or the sound of a distant attack. Is vital for mental stability. Focus on the present. Don't dwell too much on the past or worry about an uncertain future. Survival depends on focusing on what you can control in the present moment. Reach out, communicate with fellow survivors, even if it's only a brief exchange. Isolation will only exacerbate feelings of hopelessness. Support in your community. No one can survive alone for long. Stay vigilant, but also remember that the mind is just as crucial as the body in survival. A calm, clear mind will help you make better decisions, avoid panic, and increase your chances of survival. Continue to monitor local broadcasts and stay connected to your fellow survivors. We'll be back with further updates. For now, take care of your physical and mental health. Another emergency broadcast update focusing on crisis communications and the government's role in ensuring long-term survival during the ongoing outbreak. As we continue to monitor the situation, it is important to recognize that we are in the early stages of a global crisis. Federal and local governments are working tirelessly to maintain some level of coordination, but it is clear that resources are stretched thin and trust in institutions is beginning to erode. However, without proper channels of communication, survival efforts will be significantly hampered. To underestimate the importance of official communication during these chaotic times. It is vital that every survivor, community, and group of people follows government-issued broadcasts, even if they seem uncertain or complete. The government's role in providing updates, strategic plans, and safety measures remains crucial. Broadcasts serve as lifelines for coordination, helping us understand the scope of the outbreak and what actions need to be taken. Despite the collapse of many infrastructures, our government's emergency channels are still functioning. Their reach is limited. Radio frequencies, satellite signals, communications continue to operate for the time being. Survivors should ensure they are tuned into the correct channels for regular updates. While we are seeing some breakdowns in order, these broadcasts will provide the best available information. Communication systems, even government-led ones, have proven less reliable than anticipated. Satellite networks are sporadic, and the infected are causing major interference in some regions. This disruption hampers our ability to share vital information. It is critical that survivors understand this and do not rely solely on government broadcasts. Self-sufficiency will be key in the coming months. Communication with other groups and survivors is equally important. Be aware that some areas have lost all forms of communication with the outside world. These remote areas are considered isolated zones. If you are in of these areas, you must rely on manual methods of communication, such as signals, pre-established codes, and SVS points, until communications are re-established. The emergency response units, though stretched thin, are working to maintain order and support evacuation efforts. However, we must manage expectations. The response teams have limited resources, and there are areas of the country that they cannot reach. Local emergency teams might be your best chance for immediate support, but even they may not be fully equipped to handle large-scale emergencies. Evacuation centers are still functioning, but access is difficult and unpredictable. Expect that you might need to travel significant distances. Always be prepared for delays or the possibility of center locations changing. Government-provided shelters are operational, but the quality of support varies depending on proximity to major infected zones. It's critical that you work closely with local authorities. Government will be relying on trusted local officials and community leaders to help maintain order and manage evacuations. These local leaders are on the front lines of the crisis, and they are often the first to receive updates or assistance. Survivors must be vigilant. Individuals or groups may attempt to manipulate these lines of communication for personal gain. Reports of organized groups exploiting vulnerable communities have surfaced, and we urge caution when dealing with others who may have your best interests in mind. Trust your local authorities, but verify information before taking action. Think about long-term survival. The early days of the outbreak were marked by chaos, but we are entering a phase where survival will require greater foresight. As much as the government is trying to maintain order, that individuals and groups will need to develop self-reliance. Stockpiling essential supplies is a must. Food and medicine should be prioritized, but you must also plan for shelter, defense, and the ability to maintain personal security. The infected are not our only threat. The disintegration of social order, lack of resources, and psychological strain will present their own challenges in the days to come. Every survivor to continue to adapt, evolve, and prepare for what lies ahead. Government resources will be stretched thinner and thinner, and it is likely that you will need to rely on your own survival skills in the future. Community networks and survivor groups will be crucial for long-term survival. Finally, survivors to continue monitoring these broadcasts. While the situation is dire, staying informed about infection rates, evacuation routes, and government actions will remain the best strategy for navigating this crisis. Always, these broadcasts will contain vital updates, especially on evacuation routes and emerging safe zones. This update addresses the emotional and psychological toll that the ongoing outbreak is having on survivors. While physical survival remains critical, we cannot ignore the mental and emotional strain that many are facing. As the situation continues to worsen, are not only dealing with the threat of infection, but also with the fear, anxiety, and trauma that accompanies such an unprecedented crisis. The constant fear of being attacked, of the unknown, and the anxiety of losing lovers is overwhelming. This emotional burden weighs heavily on survivors, and it can affect decision-making. Infected, unpredictable weather patterns, and dwindling resources all contribute to a sense of dread that permeates every day. Psychological distress has already begun to manifest in violent behaviors, irrationals, and elements of overwhelming despair. These reactions are a natural part of dealing with such extreme trauma. Also make survival more difficult. As we continue to encounter more groups of survivors, it is imperative that we recognize signs of psychological strain and offer support where we can. One of the most harrowing aspects of outbreak is the emotional toll of losing loved ones to the infection. Survivors report a crushing sense of helplessness as they watch family and friends slowly transform into the very creatures they are fighting against. Some have even shared stories of seeing familiar faces among the infected, an unnerving reminder that no one is safe. For those who are in the unfortunate position of witnessing the transformation of a loved one, we understand the extreme emotional strain this causes. It is essential to remember that each survivor will cope differently, and it is okay to seek help or take breaks when needed. Of witnessing these transformations is not something anyone should face alone. Many survivors are experiencing a growing sense of isolation. In the early days, there was hope for re-establishing contact with others, but now as communication lines are failing and transportation has become a rarity, find themselves alone or surrounded only by strangers. This isolation can lead to severe mental distress, including depression and feelings of abandonment. Some survivors have formed small communities, but even these groups can be fragile, filled with tension, mistrust, and the ever-present fear of betrayal. The need for human connection is a driving force, but we are also seeing reports of survivors becoming more paranoid, less trusting, and more likely to make decisions out of fear rather than logic. As much as physical survival's critical, mental health is equally important in the coming days. Survivors are encouraged to create routines, to give a sense of normalcy and structure to their days. Regular tasks, such as organizing supplies or maintaining a shelter, can help provide a feeling of accomplishment and distract from overwhelming thoughts. It is also vital that you reach out to others when possible, even if only for brief interactions. Shared conversation or a reminder that you are not alone can make all the difference. The importance of emotional connections cannot be overstated. Those who can find people they trust, even in small groups, will be better equipped to handle the mental strain ahead. Mental resilience is something that can be built, but it takes time and effort. Survivors are urged to take care of their mental health just as much as their physical health. The continuous fight for survival, combined with emotional trauma, is bound to wear down even the strongest of individuals. Resilience involves acknowledging your emotional state without letting it dictate your actions. Recognize when you are overwhelmed and allow yourself moments of rest or respite. Accept that not every decision will be perfect, and that you must adapt as best you can to this ever-changing, hostile world. For some, support may come in the form of group therapy, communal sharing of experiences, or even basic stress relief activities like deep breathing or meditation. Many survivors have shared how the memories of loved ones or former lives continue to haunt them. These memories, while often painful, can also be sources of strength. For some, happier times provides the motivation to survive, while for others, it fuels a deep sense of loss and despair. There have been reports of survivors keeping personal items from their past, foes' letters, or even familiar scents, as a way holding on to what was once normal. While these memories may sometimes bring pain, ground us in moments of chaos. You are not defined by the outbreak or the loss you have experienced. Your memories, your emotions, and your resilience are what will guide you through this. Hope, the vital force in an uncertain future. As bleak as things may seem, hope remains one of the most powerful motivators for survivors. Falls apart, the drive to protect those we love and rebuild our communities continues to propel many of us forward. Hope is not a naive fantasy, it is a choice to continue in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a maintain hope, even in small things. Whether that's the belief that the infection can be contained, that resources can be replenished, or simply that life, in whatever form it takes, will continue. The human spirit is capable of more than we give it credit for. If we can hold on to hope, even in the darkest moments, we might just have a chance to rebuild. Addresses critical preparations that survivors must make in the event of the worst-case scenario. While hope is important, the reality is that we must all be prepared for the possibility of escalating threats. As resource deplete, the infected continue to multiply. It is essential to have a clear plan in place. Most vital asset. If you are not already fortified, now is the time to secure your living space. In the worst-case scenario, you will need a strong, defensible position. This means reinforcing doors, windows, and any other potential entry points. Consider using furniture, debris, or scrap materials to bolster weak spots. An area, high ground, or isolated buildings with secure exits are preferred. While supplies are already scarce, now is the time to gather whatever you can. The bare essentials include water, non-perishable food, aid kits, medical supplies, and tools for building or repairing shelter. Consider weapons for self-defense. They're useless if you don't have the proper ammunition or skills to use them. If possible, prioritize items that are reusable and compact. Think solar-powered lights, multi-purpose tools, and materials that will help you remain mobile if needed. Establish a communication system with other survivors, but do so cautiously. Networks fail and power grids collapse. You will need alternative methods of reaching out. Radios, flares, or any signaling devices that could attract attention from distant survivors. If you are fortunate enough to be near a group, a central meeting point should be established. Otherwise, have plans in place to relocate or connect with others based on previously mapped locations. Should the worst happen, staying mobile becomes essential. While it's tempting to hunker down and wait for rescue, the truth is that the longer you stay in one place, more likely you are to attract attention, both from the infected and potentially hostile survivors. If movement becomes necessary, avoid high-traffic areas and always move in small groups. If you must travel alone, stick to the shadows and keep to secluded routes. As time passes, the focus will inevitably shift from survival to long-term sustainability. This includes finding ways to grow food, create clean water, and ensure proper hygiene, which will become even more critical in the weeks and months to come. Establishing a routine for these tasks will help manage the stress of daily life and ensure the well-being of everyone involved. Sustainability is about adaptability and maintaining hope in even the darkest times. Even in the worst-case scenario, it's essential to remember the emotional toll of the ongoing crisis. Overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation will likely continue to intensify. It's important to acknowledge this and not ignore the psychological effects. Survivors who ignore these feelings may find themselves exhausted, which compromises their physical well-being. In such a time, knowing when to rest, take breaks, on mental recovery is just as important as physical preparation. As we face these difficult times, your survival will depend on a blend of preparation, strategy, and the will to continue. Trust in your instincts, but remember mental strength will be your greatest asset. Keep your focus, remain adaptable, and always be ready to make difficult choices. Continues to affect large populations worldwide. The scientific community remains focused on finding both immediate solutions and long-term responses to the situation. This section provides an overview of current research efforts and the strategies being employed to understand the nature of the infection and combat its effects. International research teams are actively investigating the origins of the zombie infection. Initial findings suggest the virus or pathogen responsible for this transformation is unlike anything seen before. With no prior case studies to rely on, researchers have turned to studying the infected, their behavior, environmental triggers that might explain the widespread contamination. In laboratories around the world, genetic samples and tissue cultures are being analyzed, though progress has been slow. Some scientists speculate that the virus or pathogen causing the reanimation of the dead may involve complex genetic alterations. This may be designed to reprogram the body's functions at a cellular level, reviving it in a state driven by aggression and the need to feed. The exact mechanisms that allow these altered bodies to continue to move without organs or normal brain functions are still a mystery, but promising breakthroughs are being reported. Particular interest is the retention of memory and emotions in the infected. Early research indicates that while most of the infected lack higher cognitive abilities, some retain faint memories or emotional triggers. These explain why some zombies appear to be drawn to certain places, individuals, or even specific objects. If it proves to be accurate, it could alter our understanding of zombie behavior and offer new strategies for avoiding them. While the focus remains on survival, a significant number of laboratories are conducting tests to find a vaccine that could prevent or cure the infection. However, efforts have faced setbacks due to the virus's unpredictability and rapid mutation. Trials are ongoing in isolated facilities, with some early-stage vaccines showing promise in animal subjects, though human trials have yet to begin. Quarantines are still being enforced across large regions. Isolation zones are established in areas where the infection has reached a critical mass. Research within these zones is heavily restricted due to the dangers of cross-contamination. However, the controlled environment of these zones has allowed for the study of infected individuals, holding key data in understanding the virus's spread and its long-term effects on both individuals and the population at large. While the pursuit of knowledge is vital, the scientific community faces significant ethicals in its research. Questions regarding the treatment of the infected, the use of survivors in experiments, and the potential exploitation of the virus for military or other purposes have led to debates. Efforts for international cooperation are ongoing, but countries remain divided in their priorities and methods of dealing with the outbreak. We urge all survivors to stay informed and remain cautious as the research and scientific community works tirelessly to understand the infection and develop responses. Please continue to monitor emergency broadcasts for updated info and guidelines. Growing chaos and overwhelming threats of the zombie outbreak, the mental toll on survivors has become a significant concern. As the infection continues to spread, many individuals are grappling with trauma, stress, and the loss of loved ones. The strain of constant danger, isolation, contributing to a mental health crisis that threatens to destabilize communities already on the brink. Survivors are not only dealing with the horror of living through the apocalypse, but also with the deep psychological of witnessing violence and death. Survivor guilt has become a widespread issue. To escape or save others often feel intense remorse for the loved ones they couldn't protect or for the choices they made in the heat of the moment. This guilt can result in depression, anxiety, and sometimes suicidal thoughts. One of the greatest challenges survivors face is the overwhelming sense of loss. Friends, family, communities are wiped out in the early stages of the outbreak. The inability to grieve or process these losses in traditional ways only deepens the emotional burden. Survivors are isolated from the support systems they once relied on, further exacerbating feelings of loneliness and helplessness. Isolation can lead to psychological decay, individuals spiraling into despair. Being constantly on edge, fearing for your life every moment, is taking its toll. The threat of zombie attacks is ever present, and this constant vigilance contributes to a heightened state of stress. Survivors are unable to relax or sleep properly, which exacerbates their mental health struggles. Mind are under constant stress, which can lead to burnout, hallucinations, and emotional instability. Some survivors have developed coping mechanisms to help them manage the overwhelming emotions and stress. These include new routines, focusing on immediate survival needs and forming tight-knit groups for mutual support. However, not all coping strategies are healthy. Desensitization to violence, obsessive focus on revenge or survival, and emotional numbing are common responses that can harm individuals in the long term. While many survivors may not have access to traditional therapy, and organizations have begun offering makeshift mental health services in the form of support groups or trained volunteers. These efforts are still in their infancy, with limited resources. However, any form of emotional can be vital for helping survivors process their trauma and move forward with their lives. Important to remember, for those of you who are struggling, you are not alone. There are survivors who understand the unique pain you are going through. We encourage anyone experiencing overwhelming emotional distress to seek help around you or from local survivor groups when possible. Post-traumatic stress disorders, PTSD, is already a significant risk for many survivors, as repeated exposure to horrific events can permanently alter their psychological state. Symptoms of PTSD may include nightmares, flashbacks, panic attacks, and an exaggerated startle response. Psychological conditions make it difficult for survivors to function in everyday tasks, much less adapt to an ever-changing and dangerous world. Treatment for PTSD is limited in the current climate, making the burden even heavier. We advise all survivors to take moments of respite when possible. While it may seem like there's no time to rest in a world like this, mental clarity can make the difference in making better decisions and staying alive. As we continue to monitor the ongoing crisis, it's imperative for survivors to remain resourceful. The supply of essential goods is running low in many regions, and the ability to adapt quickly can mean the difference between life and death. This section will cover important resources, active survival strategies that can help you endure the unpredictable challenges of the outbreak. Water, food, and medical supplies remain the cornerstones of survival. Water filtration systems or access to clean water should be prioritized above all else. In urban areas, water can be harvested from pipes or rainwater. Boil it or use purification tablets to ensure safety. Food is in scarce supply, and the pressure duration can test the limits of your creativity. Canned goods, dried foods, and packaged meals are your best bet for long-term sustenance. Hunting or scavenging for food is a viable option, but it comes with significant risk. Growing your own food in small urban gardens can also be a sustainable option for those with the skills. Basic medical supplies are becoming increasingly rare. A well-stocked first aid kit should include bandages, antiseptics, pain antibiotics if you can find them. Common infections can quickly become fatal in the absence of proper treatment. Any survivors with medical experience should consider working together to create a field hospital or makeshift clinic for treating the wounded. Finding and fortifying shelter is essential to avoid becoming a target for zombies or hostile humans. Houses should be well hidden, secure, and equipped with emergency exits. Ideally, shelter should have multiple levels or escape routes. Avoid large cities as they are overcrowded and prone to chaos. Small rural communities offer better opportunities for safety and resource acquisition. Defense is critical when facing both the infected and hostile human groups. Weapons are essential, but knowledge of how to use them is equally important. Guns, knives, and improvised weapons can provide a sense of security, but survivors should also learn hand-to-hand combat techniques for close encounters. Additionally, your alarms around your shelter can provide early warning systems. Traveling between safe zones requires careful planning. Always move in groups to increase your chances of survival, and avoid high-traffic areas where are likely to roam. Stay out of sight and keep noise to a minimum to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Possible, but be cautious. Fuel is scarce, and roadblocks may make travel difficult. Effective communication can make all the difference in survival. Radios, signal flares, and written messages can help coordinate X between survivor groups. If you find a functioning radio, use it to listen for updates or potential rescue efforts. Full of other groups listening in, keep your transmissions short and cryptic to avoid detection. Surviving with others requires strong leadership and cooperation. Forming a group of trusted individuals can enhance your chances of survival, but it also introduces complexities. Leadership must be clear. These should be divided based on skills. Trust is paramount, as betrayal in these times can be lethal. Survival is about being adaptable, resourceful, and vigilant. Stay connected with other survivors when possible, and never forget that your safety depends not just on your actions, but on the choices of those around you. Together, we can endure and rebuild. Pose the most immediate threat, it's important to acknowledge the increasing danger posed by hostile human groups. In these early days, desperation drives people to commit acts that can be just as deadly as the undead, whether it's scavenging for resources, establishing dominance, or simply taking advantage of the chaos. Groups are a growing concern. Throughout the collapse of civil order, we've seen the rise of armed gangs, rogue survivalists, and organized militias. These groups will often fight for territory or fight to establish their own or new order, making them as dangerous as the zombies they seek to escape. Are advised to stay clear of any groups that show signs of being overly territorial or hostile. Even groups that initially seem to offer safety can turn on you quickly. It's always better to remain isolated unless absolute necessary. Hostile groups are unpredictable. Some prefer to negotiate or barter for supplies. Demand your resources without question. Many of these groups resort to force as their primary form of control. Trust is a rare commodity, and betrayal often lurks within the ranks. Know that they are not just a through your physical safety. Some of these groups have been known to target the vulnerable. Women, children, acting on base instincts or a desire to assert power. Hostile groups are often armed, and their presence can be identified by their behavior. Look for signs of violence, intimidation, and a lack of empathy toward others. They may also isolate themselves from the wider survivor community and operate under strict hierarchies. Have even taken to disguising their true intentions, posing as helpers to lure unsuspecting individuals into their traps. Listen for the sound of gunfire or distant shouting. Be alert to large groups moving in unison. They tend to travel in packs, and the more organized they are, the more dangerous they become. In a situation where confrontation is inevitable, remember that survival comes first. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. If you are approached, try to de-escalate the situation by being non-confrontational, avoiding eye contact. The more passive and compliant you appear, the less likely you are to be targeted. Turn violent, escape should be your priority. Use any distractions or resources around you to your advantage. If you have to fight, fight to survive, not to win, and always keep a way out. As food and medical supplies grow leasing scarce, desperation will drive more people to the brink of madness. Do anything to get what they need, and the more they suffer, the more dangerous they become. Survivors should be vigilant in keeping their defenses up, as the threat of these desperate individuals is only going to increase. While the zombie threat remains paramount, don't underestimate the danger posed by other survivors. Their numbers are increasing, and the desperation to survive can turn even the most peaceful of people into cold, ruthless individuals. Survivors are left to fend for themselves in this uncertain world. There are still pockets of research being conducted to understand the virus and its effects on both the living and the infected. Governments, military groups, and a few organizations are making efforts to research the outbreak. Communication is now a major hurdle. Despite the chaos, scientists around the world have not given up. There are reports of research labs working day and night, studying the origins of the infection and how it spreads. Efforts focused on identifying the virus's genetic makeup, understanding how it takes control of the human body. Most critically, whether a cure or vaccine could be developed. However, the sheer scale of the outbreak has made these efforts extraordinarily difficult. Many of the most vital research centers have been overrun or abandoned, leaving a few isolated locations where progress is being made. In the early days of the outbreak, we're quick to deploy military forces to combat the infection. The strategy involved isolating the most affected regions, establishing quarantine zones, and attempting to control the flow of civilians fleeing infected areas. But as the virus spread faster than anticipated, these efforts proved inadequate. Now, military factions are working in conjunction with scientists to study and monitor the infection. Some have even resorted to using captured infected individuals in controlled environments to better understand how the virus manipulates the brain. This research is crucial, but it comes at great risk. Of communication now either down or unreliable, the challenge of gathering and distributing scientific knowledge is immense. Many of the research teams are isolated, and even basic reports or data transmissions are often late or incomplete. This lack of information creates gaps in our understanding of how the infection behaves. Vulnerable to its ever-changing nature, some researchers believe that the virus might be mutating, developing new strains that could be even more dangerous than what we've seen so far. Early reports of super-infected, heightened strength or intelligence have emerged, though these accounts remain unverified. Ongoing efforts to contain the outbreak. Quarantine zones are still in effect in some regions. These zones are heavily guarded, and entry or exit is strictly controlled. If you are in one of these zones, it is crucial to follow the protocols. Maintain distance from infected individuals, report any symptoms immediately. Always wear protective gear. Authorities are also working to identify safe zones where survivors can seek refuge, though the security of these locations is uncertain. If you are considering travel, be sure to check with any governmental sources for updates on safety and secure routes. Continue to focus on the possibility of a cure, though there are still many unknowns. Some are optimistic, believing that with enough time and the right resources, a vaccine or treatment could be developed. However, the situation grows more dire every day, and the resources necessary for large-scale research are dwindling. As we look toward the future, the question remains, will we find a way to stop this infection, or is humanity doomed to be consumed by it? That concludes the current status of the research efforts. Please remain vigilant and safe. Your survival may depend on it. Survivors listening, this is a critical message. We know the world feels uncertain, and you might be questioning whether there's any hope left. But know this: humanity hasn't been wiped out. Every day, individuals are surviving, finding ways to continue, whether by securing food, protecting safe zones, with other survivors to rebuild. If you're receiving this transmission, you still have a chance. While our communications network is limited, there are still some channels open. We urge you to stay tuned for updates. Reach out to survivors when possible, and always remain on the move if safety dictates. Life may be your last. Some regions are still trying to maintain a semblance of order, though it is unclear how long this will last. It is vital to remain connected with any groups or networks, even if it's through short-burst communication. If you hear any updates or emergency broadcasts, we implore you to act on them quickly. Resources become increasingly scarce. We ask all survivors to prioritize their needs carefully. Water, food, medical supplies, these will be your lifelines. However, as you search for these resources, be mindful of the danger surrounding them. Infected zones are often the areas where food is still available. But be warned, they're heavily populated with the infected. Don't underestimate the threat. Even in what seem like safe zones, the risk of an outbreak can escalate quickly. Always have an escape plan and make sure you're equipped for both defense and evasion. Although the world may feel broken and fragmented, it's important that we remember is survival. Work together. If you come across other survivors, share knowledge and supplies. Create safe spaces where you can help each other even in the smallest ways. A collective effort is more likely to succeed than going alone. Remember that the infected retain only a sliver of their former selves. Respond to certain stimuli. Some reports indicate that the infected have been seen in groups, wandering aimlessly but still seeking human presence. This is important because understanding their behavior could give you an edge. At this time, we are actively working to restore communication, improve containment strategies, support to survivors. However, the path ahead is treacherous. We cannot predict how the virus will evolve, and any future outbreaks may be more severe. We continue to monitor key locations for any signs of containment success. If you find yourself in one of these areas, your safety could depend on timely action. Safe zone is available. Make your way there. Don't hesitate, but always remain cautious and don't trust rumors. Validate information before acting. This is not the end. There is still hope. Hold on. Your survival to humanity has a fighting chance. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember, together we can endure.